suggestions, ideas, and recommendations. And then we're going to try to summarize what we all came up with. And then we are going to send the person that presented a summary of all those great recommendations and resources that were discussed during the echo. Okay.
We do have a couple poll questions here really quick.
Great.
To get I am so sorry. I don't know why, but it says that because I'm logging from another device, my polling session is inactive. So we will just move on.
Okay, well, let's move on to introductions. And if we get it figured out, we'll give you guys a fun poll. I think one of the polls was letting us know what type of learning most of the children that you're working with are doing. So if you guys want to chat in, are most of you guys doing virtual learning? Are most of you guys doing in-person learning with, safety precautions or hybrid? That'll just give our presenters okay, I'm seeing hybrid and in-person. That'll give us an idea of, all the different perspectives that people are bringing today. So we're going to go right to introductions, lots of in-person, seems like just kind of a variety. All right, can you move on to the next slide, Alice? And I guess we're going to do introduction. So go on to the next one, if you can. Great. Okay. So most of you have already done this. So if you've already done this, you do not need to do this. But if you haven't already introduced yourself, we want to hear from you. So let us know who you are, where you're from, and maybe one thing that you're hoping to gain from for today. So if you haven't done that yet, you can let us know what you're hoping to learn or what you're hoping to gain. And then I'm going to go ahead and introduce our hub team. You all are the spokes, if you saw that little diagram. So you all are those spokes that are introducing yourselves now. And then we are considered sort of the hub team. So I'm Skylar Bellinger. I'm a psychologist here in developmental pediatrics at KU Medical Center, and I'm part of the Telehealth ROKCS and Can Do team. So I'm happy to be here with you today. Leni, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Leni Swails. I'm also a psychologist at KU Med, and I'm excited to be here with everyone. Also, it looks like I do have the ability to launch the polls, and I have them loaded. So guys, just let me know if you want me to do that, okay?
You can.
Off to you.
Great. Yeah, go ahead. All right. I see a lot of people already kind of jumping in and introducing themselves. So that's great. And hoping to learn more about resources for better behavior. Okay. So our poll is, how do most children and adolescents you work with currently receive their education? You guys already chatted this, but please do our poll so we can get a summary. And while you're doing that, I'll have Alice. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Alice Zhang, and I am a behavioral analyst by training. And I'm also working on the Can Do and Telehealth grant. So really excited to see you all coming back, all the new people joining our sessions as well.
Great. And Melissa, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Melissa Maris. I'm a clinical community psychologist, physically located in Columbia, Missouri, but excited to work with the Telehealth ROKCS. It's great to see so many familiar faces from our first webinar, and I'm excited to learn with you all.
Great. Okay, and it looks like maybe we have some poll results. Yeah, that most of you, 56% are a combination of hybrid and hybrid, online, and in person. So kind of you're doing it all, which I think honestly sounds to me like it's a lot harder. So kudos to you all for trying to manage, 3 different ways to teach and to educate and to support children, because that sounds like a huge challenge. And there's some folks that are only in person, and some people that are the very small number that are only online. All right, great. Okay, well, I think, Alice, the next slide is jumping right. Oh, let's do our poll real quick. So we keep talking about case presentations as a really big piece of our ECHO model. And the reason for that is because we want it to be collaborative. We want to hear from you all what you guys need support with and how we can all work together to find solutions and brainstorm ideas. So we keep saying case presentation, but we know that may sound a little like awkward or uncomfortable or intimidating to some of you that aren't in like a medical field. So we want to try to use a name that sounds good to you. So what do you guys think about that name, case presentation? Not acceptable. It sounds intimidating, somewhat acceptable, or acceptable. I think I could do that. Or I don't even know what you mean when you say case presentation. It's kind of flipping a little bit, but it looks like most people are okay with that name. If you guys have other ideas for, something that is more friendly to mental health centers and educators, let us know. So please chat in some ideas, whether it's like a collaborative learning example or something like that makes sense to you. Let us know if you have any ideas and chat those in. All right, thank you for giving us your feedback on that. So we are going to move right into the didactics about managing challenging or disruptive behaviors. So I'll turn it over to you all.
Sorry, I guess that's me. So I'm excited to talk about this. So our objectives for today are three. So first, we want to briefly discuss disruptive behaviors in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also want to identify some prevention strategies to reduce disruptive behaviors, because I really think that when it comes to disruptive behaviors, it's mostly about prevention. What can we do to avoid getting ourselves in this situation in the first place, and less so about kind of the after the fact intervention. And then we want to talk about how can we apply some of these prevention strategies to a case presentation. And we're really excited to have some of our collaborators from Pawnee Mental Health who are going to be helping us with that today. Next slide. So if we're thinking about some of the current data that's out there about disruptive behaviors in COVID, to some extent, I feel like I don't need to tell you guys this because you're living it. So when we're looking at, there's a really interesting article that was published in the end of August that reviewed the 22 currently published studies that have looked at child functioning during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what was interesting was they said it looks like this has school closures and school changes have affected about 91% of the student population globally. So this is something that's not just being experienced by our students in Kansas, but it's really something that's happening worldwide. Um, when you're looking at some of the data like across those 22 studies, they're finding that overall, again, you're living this, you probably know this, there's a lot more increased inattention, so a lot more distractibility. Kids are showing more clingy behaviors, both younger kids as well as older kids, and across the board, higher levels of irritability. There's also a little bit of differences by age, which makes sense. At different developmental stages, kids express things differently. Younger kids tend to be more clingy with their parents right now. And for older kids, as they're finding more of their activities have been canceled or they're uncertain what's going to happen with their upcoming activities, there's more feelings of despondency. We also know that there's increased levels of parent stress, and all of these things can interact together, right? So, as kids are feeling more irritable or maybe more clingy with their parents, and parents are having more pressures from their work or other types of stress, that those things can kind of collide and create higher levels of mental health challenges among the youth population. Donna Glover is testifying that that is true for teenagers. um, the other thing we know about pediatric mental health in general is that negative feelings that people are having, whether it's despondency, clinginess, irritability, that can either turn inward, where someone becomes more depressed and anxious and those internalizing symptoms, or you can see it turn outward. And that's going to be more of the focus of what we're talking about today is externalizing behaviors or disruptive behaviors. So just thinking about that's where some of these things might be coming from, is all this uncertainty, all these things that have changed is leading to some of these acting out behaviors to some degree. The thing that I thought was an important takeaway from this article, too, is they talked about how the known mental health strategies that we already have are really the ones that are going to help all of our kids and families now, too. So it's really about taking some of the knowledge you already have about pediatric mental health and behavior and thinking about how can we apply this to all of the students and children that we interact with. So applying that in a more global manner. Next slide. So if you're trying to boil these things down to just a couple of takeaway points, we know that it's important to build relationships in order to prevent disruptive behaviors. We also know that it's important that there's practice here, like practice makes perfect. And the more we can do that, the more someone will not have disruptive behaviors. And also it's slow and steady wins the race. This is not a sprint. This is something that we have to be measured and calm and slow and steady about. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So when we're thinking about preventing disruptive behaviors, it really all starts with building relationships. So think for yourself and feel free to add into the chat box, who was the best coach or the best boss that you've ever worked with? What was it about them that made them great? What was positive about that relationship that really helped you grow? And how did that impact the quality of your ultimate work? So for me, if I think about the best coach or best, I was never an athletic person. If I think about the best boss I ever had or best band director, then that was someone who was really noticing what I did right and was encouraging me for that and letting me know, like, I'm here for you and I'm noticing all the good stuff you're doing. They also had really high expectations for me. But I felt like I could do it because they were recognizing whenever I was meeting those expectations. And my work, yay, thanks Ashley Fowler for the shout out to the band nerds. The quality of my work was also higher because I felt like I could meet those expectations. And again, that was being recognized. So knowing that that's an important thing to show when you're building relationships with youth. Next slide. Um, we also know that if you're trying to build relationships, that's really going to help you because when someone feels good about their relationship with you, they're more likely to want to work for you, right? That was also part of that best boss or best director that you had. So when you feel positive in that bond, then you're going to be more likely to respond when someone asks to do something that's really, really hard. And we have to think about the same thing for our youth, right? Well, the way to do that is really to focus on that good behavior. So praise, praise, specific praise. So this is something where I feel like it's like Oprah with like, you get a praise and you get a praise and you get a praise. Really giving that away and thinking about for the youth that you work with, what are the important praisable behaviors that you want to focus on? So I have this picture of trees down here because I think you can think about praising the small things you see, which is really important, especially for self-esteem. Like, wow, you did really well on that. That drawing is beautiful that you made for young kids, or for older kids. Like, thanks so much for thanks so much for picking that up when you dropped it. Those are small behaviors that are important, right? But we can also think about this where we're praising the whole forest, praising the big picture and taking a step back and saying like, hey, I noticed that all day you were really focused on your work and I'm so proud of you for that. So also taking the time to recognize those big picture things that are important to you. You can also think about for your students, your class, or the kids that you work with, what is the individual thing that this child needs to work on or needs to be praised for? And how can I address that with my praise? So, for example, if I'm working with someone who's trying really hard to work on frustration tolerance, I'm probably going to be praising them for sticking with it when something was really, really hard. If I'm working with someone who's trying to improve their relationship with other kids, I'm going to be praising them when I see, hey, you did a great job noticing what that other student said and then commenting on it and responding to it, right? So that praise should be very individualized and personal based on what the important goals are for the child that you're working with. Next slide. Another thing that's important part of building relationships is really making sure that people feel heard. And you can do that with active listening. Active listening is a strategy that we all use, and it's certainly a part of being good at being in relationships. It's also a basic skill we learn as mental health therapists and counselors. And that's the idea of making sure that you are listening to what someone says and paraphrasing it back to them because that makes someone feel like, okay, good, they got it. They understood what I was trying to say. You can paraphrase the content and you can also reflect feelings. And this is really helping kids to become more in tune with their emotions and better able to recognize and respond to those feelings. So it sounds like you're saying that this math assignment is really hard. It sounds like you're really disappointed and frustrated that you don't know what's going to happen with your softball team. So kind of reflecting both the content specifically and then also trying to take it to the next level. And if there's an underlying emotion there, recognizing that. Donna made a great point too about one of the ways that's really good for active listening is getting that eye contact and getting on their level and really feeling that kind of sense of personal connection. And I'd love more, any ideas people have for leveling this up, please throw it in the comment box because I love hearing your experiences too. Next slide. When it comes to building relationships, finding ways to carve out that one-on-one time goes so far. That's really important both at school. So finding those moments where you can give that individualized attention, get that eye contact, get on that level, and find that connection with that one-on-one connection with a student. It's also extremely important for mental health when it comes to home too. I know it feels like we're all spending a lot of time together, but that's different than having dedicated time where you're really having that one-on-one connection with a child. And finding ways to really let this be child or teen led, letting them pick an activity that's of interest to them and the adults kind of joining them in their world and focusing on what they're interested in. For younger kids, I think the key to this is making sure that it's really frequent, but it doesn't need to be too long. Brief is fine. So even 5 minutes a day where you're for younger kids, like, under age 10, where you're focusing on activity they like, enjoying them in that, that's wonderful. That'll go so far as building that relationship. For older kids or teens, they often want to have a longer activity because it takes a little time to warm up. It takes a little time to do that connection. Or the activity they like playing a game or building something together or going on a walk, takes longer. And that's fine. So you might make it less frequent, but longer for older kids and teens. So really thinking about how have you guys found ways to make that individual attention work, either in school settings or in other settings too. I'm curious to hear in the chat box. Oh, some people are saying you can't do private Zoom meetings. I don't know if there's other ways you can send a private message to a student through another kind of forum, but the idea is finding a way where you're kind of got this big classroom setting, finding ways to find that one-on-one connection and attention. Next slide. I also think another thing that really helps with building relationships is being willing to be really silly and goofy. If we're all laughing together, we're forming a relationship together. And so finding ways to infuse humor along with your relationship building, I think will go a really long way. So in the virtual setting, it can even be something goofy like virtual high fives. Use your reaction buttons to kind of do that relationship building. Um, I I saw a teacher who earlier in the pandemic had a reward system going with their students, and if they were showing good behavior in the middle school over a period of time, he was going to shave his head, and he totally did, and the kids worked really hard for it. And I think that's a great example of a way to infuse a reward system with being silly. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Leni. So it's really important to build those relationships using like the praise and the reflective listening and paraphrasing that all the good things that Leni just talked about. And also it's really important to remember that attention can really feed disruptive behaviors. So as a behavior analyst, maybe this is a little bit too much, but attention is really called a generalized reinforcer, which means that it can work very broadly for any children for the most part. So no matter whether they're young children or they're adolescents, and especially the attention from adults who, like teachers, parents who they respect and they love, they want to get your approval. Remember, those attention can be used for positive behaviors, but also can feed into disruptive behaviors. So it is really important to try to ignore disruptive behaviors, attention-seeking behaviors when possible. There are definitely times that it's really hard to ignore because there might be concern for safety behaviors. So at those times, you need to intervene. Please do that, but still try to minimize the attention that you are giving to that particular behavior. So, so using plain ignoring, I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of you already know this, but it's really important to, not reprimand. I know that sometimes it's the instinct to say, stop doing that, quit doing that, you can do better. All those type of things can be a form of attention to the children's disrupt behaviors. Also, a lot of times there are some very subtle behaviors like our eye contact, our facial expressions, whether you are rolling your eyes, whether you are crossing your arms and staring at the child when the child is engaging in disrupt behavior, that potentially can also fit into that behavior as well. So again, it's just really important to stay cool. So try not to have any facial expressions, using your poker face. And then if you really have a hard time not to pay attention, then try to maybe look at some other things that are not directly towards the child. The important thing is really stay cool, stay calm. Also, while you're trying to, do your best to ignore the disrupt behavior, not to ignore the child, but ignore the disruptive behavior, it's also really important for us to stay alert, to really catch that good behavior, because there would be moments the child is being calm, is stop crying, or being nice, being gentle, all those type of things that can be like really something you can catch that behavior and really build on that using all the positive behavior support strategies, the praise, to really praise that and give that positive attention so that we can, redirect the child's behavior to something more positive. Also, another thing that what we can do is that we all know that disruptive behaviors often get worse when we are faced with expectations that feel new or excessive. So for a lot of our children, they are facing a lot of new expectations because the changes that have happened in the past several months. And it can be overwhelming, and that can be part of why you see more a higher level of disrupt behaviors. And I think it really think about that. I think about the first time I went to a grocery store after staying at home or trying to do like pickup or delivery for a while. It was really overwhelming. I can feel that because of all the changes and the expectations, wearing face masks and everything, the new behavior expectations, it really can make my as an adult, I felt like, I was having a really hard time. So it's really expected for the children to, show some disrupt behaviors in some way. So in addition, disrupt behaviors also get worse when we start responding differently, because, if something that if they scream or if they cry and they get your reaction, and now you stop reacting to those behaviors. This is something called an extinction burst, right? So things will get worse before it's get better. And it's really hard for you to experience as an adult to experience that extinction burst. But just know that if you can, really stick your ground, and things will get better eventually.
So I think the other thing is to think about, you can apply these things, and again, really making it individual for the person you're working with. So you need to think about not just what someone should be doing, like in general, kids should do X, Y, and Z, but think about for this child, where are they at right now, and where's my goal for them? So for example, if you have a child who's completely refusing to do any kind of academic work, which this is something I hear about all the time, right? I'm sure you guys experience it too. Then our long-term goal is for them to complete assignments, but we have to probably start a lot smaller, especially now when routines have changed, expectations have changed, and everyone's feeling a lot more stressed. So this is an example of kind of how slow and steady is going to help us win the race. So we're going to think about our long-term goal is complete assignment, and think about what are examples of very small behaviors that are gradually working us towards that goal. This is a way to also apply praise in a more kind of higher level way. And thinking about, if my goal is for them to complete an assignment, maybe I start with just praising them for sitting in their seat. I praise them for reading the instructions, and can even pair some of these things with a reward system to help kind of sweeten the deal. The expectations of what it takes to earn that reward could increase over time, but we need to start small, because in order to get that momentum going, that behavioral momentum, we need to start where they're at. Next slide. Thank you. The other thing is that we're thinking about rewards. We want to make sure they're visual, and we want to make sure that they're meaningful. So always try to think about, how can I incorporate the person I'm working with in choosing those rewards, and making sure they're age appropriate and interesting to them. And in the interest of time, I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Excellent. And thank you, Leni and Alice, for your comments with that, and everybody for your chats and your questions and your responses. I think one of the things, and Leni really started it off when we were having our conversation today, is that part of our strategy for really thinking about all young people in a setting, whether you're in a clinic or in a school, in a community, is what we can do that will benefit one child, but also what we can do that will benefit all children, and also what we can do that will actually benefit all people in our school community or in our clinic community. And that's really what this slide is focusing on here, is thinking about positive thinking and reinforcement. A lot of these concepts that we're talking about, we often kind of think about and apply at the individual level, but absolutely have population level implications. And one of those things, and you will have certainly heard about this before, is this idea of positive thinking and really thinking about growth mindset. And this is something that can be super helpful with an individual child, but actually is something that we all can benefit from. And so kind of shifting from sort of unhelpful thought patterns or unhelpful ways that we might frame things, and really focusing more on how it can be helpful and proactive. So this idea of you know, this is so hard, I can't do it, to this is hard right now, or I can do this with help. And so kind of changing some of that language. And it's been really interesting when I've worked with school administrators and talked with them about this idea of shifting towards positive thinking. A lot of times I get pushback that this is a small thing. It doesn't seem like it will have a big impact, but really what we're talking about here is a shift in culture. And so this is what's happening when teachers are getting together and eating together. This is what we're saying when we're talking to parents and guardians, and what we say when we talk to each other as the adults in a community context. That really can shift. And so thinking about positive thinking and how we can reframe those words that we use to try to focus more on that growth mindset and things that are really productive, really thinking about this as a tier 1 school-wide or clinic-wide, community-wide sort of intervention.
So sorry, I was muted. So the last thing that we really want to talk about is really offer choices when possible. So in terms of instructions, because we give a lot of instructions every day to our children, so it is really important to think about what kind of instructions can be choices. So do you want to work on math or reading? Do you want to do a presentation or a video recording for this project? And also, it is really also important to involve children to offer choices of rewards. So do you want to work for Legos? You want to play outside, or you want to just, you know, play video games or playing basketball outside? All those things, when possible, it will be helpful to offer choices. So the key takeaway today is some questions that we know a lot of the information you all already know, but we really want you to think about what are your key takeaways from today, and what will you apply in your practice this week, and what will you share with a colleague or parent from the discussion and from the presentation from today. So please feel free to chat in all your takeaways and your thoughts about how you can apply and practice. We also have a little bit of resources here, and we will send out the slide later.
I love hearing everybody's mottos. Like, I feel like this is what we should all be sharing as our motto for the year. So grace all over the place. I love that. Leni had a good one. Some people are going to be starting to use their poker face, which I think is a really great takeaway, especially thinking about, you know, even virtually in Zoom, like that's the only thing you can see is your reaction, right? So thinking about how can I keep that that poker face going so that they don't get the reaction that way either. Oh my gosh, so slow and steady wins. Thanks, Polly. Celebrating the small wins too. Yeah, this is great. I love all these takeaways and mottos. And so hopefully if you don't have a motto for the year, maybe you can use some of the things that we've talked about or some of these ideas that folks have shared to create one. So I feel like we all kind of need a motto this year. Some kind of, mine's kind of been like grace and gratitude, or thinking about how to focus on those things. So all right, so we're gonna pivot over to the case discussion things and get those to you as well, so that you'll have those resources and ideas that were presented today. So thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and John and team for sharing your case and your experience with us. It was really beneficial to everyone. So just wanted to say have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.